Good evening. Thanks to everybody. Thanks, Makaran. And especially thanks to the organizers of this conference. I think I've been really amazed to see how it's been organized. I think it's a good example of a new India that is coming in front of us in a very lively and strong way. I am the last speaker, so I don't know if I have the privilege of speaking less or more. You will decide. But I must say that much more of what I had to say, it's been already said by Makaran in his excellent, by Paul also. I wanted to speak about the greatness of Sanskrit and the soft power of Sanskrit. There is also one thing that we like to say that I am really impressed because I've been to many seminars. I've been to seminars on language, to Indological seminars. I have also been to religious seminars. But I am impressed by the concept that has been taken here. And the concept is soft power, because that has given to this seminar a special width, a special diversity. We have been touching almost all the subjects. And before going into the question of Sanskrit, I would like also to reflect a little bit on this word, soft power. I don't know if you realize that soft power is an oxymoron. As you all know, oxymorons are statements that seem to be contradictory, but they are not. And soft power is an oxymoron because power, we always think it is hard. As somebody said here, soft power ultimately is authority, which is very different from what is soft power. So, oxymorons, I give a few examples if you are, just to refresh your mind. I mean, the classical example of oxymoron is bittersweet, right? We have oxymorons which are really funny, like original copy. We have oxymorons which are really deep, like a dark light, which was also a mystical term, especially from St. John de la Croix. We have oxymorons that are really poetical, like deafening silence. And we have oxymorons that are funny, a small crowd. We have my favorite is, I am clearly confused. But we also touch here an oxymoron along with soft power, which I think is perverse. And I am sorry that Subhash Kak is not here. That oxymoron is artificial intelligence. There is no artificial intelligence. There is a perverse one. Because if it is artificial, it's not intelligence. And if it is intelligent, it's not artificial. Because as we know, intelligence is a characteristic of consciousness, which is never artificial because consciousness is not made. Well, coming back to soft power, I think that's the essence of this panel too, that the biggest soft power that we have as humans is the word. And that is not a metaphor. I am not saying that the word, the language, speech is a soft power as a metaphor. It's just by speaking the man becomes a prime minister. He does nothing else than speaking, and he becomes the most powerful man in a country. So really to say, the word is soft power, is the essence of soft power. I would like to say that the Indians have the rare distinction of being the civilization that most acknowledge the power of the word. And that was done especially in the Rig Veda, and through the medium of Sanskrit. Dandin said, the word is the light of the world. Without the word, we will fall into darkness, into silence, no? And since we are speaking of soft power, which is different from hard power, I would like to draw the attention to one thing. In Sanskrit, all the words that refer to the word are feminine. Bak, we have Bharati, we have Bhasha, we have Bani, we have Gir, we have plenty of words are always feminine, because soft power is always feminine. And that's the difference between soft power and hard power. I would say in Spanish, for instance, power is masculine, el poder. I don't know in English if it is masculine or feminine, but I will insist this very clearly, that soft power has to be feminine as the word is feminine. Again, all the words in Sanskrit that mean intelligence are also feminine. And that's the important, Sarasvati is feminine, Sarasvati acts as an interface between us humans, our little and individual humanity, and the absolute. And we can communicate. That's the problem. We speak about spirituality, and we can speak in high terms, but the problem is always the same, the intersection point between our little selves and the absolute. And then is done through language. Being which is feminine again, and it's a feminine power. We have to recognize that, and that's the era we are now coming into. I would like to say one more thing, which reverses a little bit what has been said here during all these days. And people say that without hard power, we don't have soft power. Well, I would like to say the contrary. I am the last speaker, unless nobody will dispute this after me. So I had that privilege at least. I would like to say that without soft power, hard power is nothing. In fact, hard power does not stay without soft power. And I can give examples from politics about that. Think about the Roman Empire. It lasted for 1,000 years. It was not only by the arms. If the Romans had not brought Romanization of the people and Latin culture, I mean, the Roman Empire could have not lasted these 1,000 years. One example of how without soft power, hard power is useless, we have in the collapse of the Soviet Union. When we are left without a narrative, and that's soft power, even if we have our hard power intact, that hard power will eventually collapse. Hard power gives results in the short term, but not in the long run. People have to be convinced. They cannot be always and beaten into submission. They have to be convinced, and they have taken into by the power of the word and the power of culture. I think the British left India for the very same reason. When they came, they had soft power. And you know very well, Makaran, because you are a specialist. And their soft power lasts some time. But when Gandhi came and the new ideas came in the 20th century, their hard power was intact. They won the Second World War. They didn't have any reason to go, but their soft power had gone. Well, I think that was, for me, important to say, to enhance the importance of that wonderful concept, which is soft power, and then bring us together here. Well, I have taken a lot of time, take a little bit more. I try to say I am a Spaniard. I come from Barcelona, a Catalan too. I made a Sanskrit Catalan dictionary. I am, in 3 months, I hope the Sanskrit Spanish dictionary will see the light. It's already in the press. I think, thanks. We in the Spanish-speaking world, Sanskrit is taught in different places, in Spain, also in Mexico is perhaps the country where Sanskrit most flourishes, also in Peru, in Argentina, in Chile, in Colombia, and recently Costa Rica was celebrating his 50 years of Sanskrit. Imagine, such a small country, I'm sure many of you cannot locate it on the map, but it has 50 years of Sanskrit. And that's, like yoga, Sanskrit has become universal heritage. It's not, it's an Indian product. We must never forget that it is Indian. We should never do that. But it's become an universal thing. There are small groups of people all over the world learning Sanskrit and trying to understand reality through the conceptual mapping of Sanskrit. As for myself, I was very happy to be able to come to India. I came to India following a lady. That was my first visit here because a lady who is now my wife, she wanted to come here, so I came here. I didn't have much interest in India, I must confess at that time. Then I was fascinated by the culture here. I read the Gita in a very bad translation, but even bad translations do the work. That's also something that I learned after all these years. And that's an excuse for translators like me. I read the Gita and I was struck by one shlok. It was really impressive. Then I decided to go back to Spain and to come back and study Sanskrit in Banaras. My wife was all too happy because he loves India, even more than me. So we came and we spent 16 years in Varanasi at the Banaras Hindu University. I would like to remember my teachers. I spoke with him yesterday, Bhagi Shastri, still alive and going well, 85 years old. And he looked like he was 30 years back. And Sri Narayan Mishra, who unfortunately he died in 2011. They are great scholars. Why a Westerner like me wants to learn Sanskrit? I think Ram Dass said it, no? I mean, we have to be reborn. I think we are Patita Hindus. That for something we had to reborn in a Westerner's body, came here. And after we did our mission, and we tried to do our best, to propagate this Hindu Dharma abroad. Going to Banaras and studying Sanskrit there, it is not an easy thing. And the first thing I must say, and it struck me very much, is the indigenous way of learning versus the Western way of learning. I was much struck for the knowledge of a pandit, how pandits, they teach Sanskrit. And there is a big difference between a traditional pandit and a Western scholar. A Western scholar is a person who knows where things are. You ask him for some question, he will go to the shelves, take the book, and then tell you what it's all about. But a Sanskrit pandit is a person who interiorizes knowledge. He take my Sri Narayan Mishra used to say, you learn one book and that's enough if you learn it well, because it will touch all the darshanas in their discussion. This is very important, the interiorization of knowledge, because sometimes we think we read too much. I know that goes against the grain. We read too much and we assimilate very little. And the traditional way is another one. You memorize the shlokas, you meditate upon them, you bring them into life, and that's something that is still very alive in India. I would like to say that I raise a call also to protect the traditional pandit. The traditional pandit is a storehouse of neglected wisdom. There are some of the people, because they are Brahmins, and Brahmins are supposed to be oppressors of the lower caste, but they live very poor lives, and they have no resources to keep their learning, their wisdom. They have to do all kinds of things. I was very happy in Chicago to learn by Hari Kiran and the Indic Foundation, thanks, that they are doing a wonderful job in trying to uplift the material position of traditional pandits. It has been said here several times. You must preserve all these people who, by not speaking English, and I am not attacking English, they are considered by many Indians as illiterate because they are not able to speak in English, they are not able to put, and they are such sages, such people with such profound knowledge that they need to be protected. And that should be one of the important policies that one should take, protect the traditional pandit and make them feel honored because they're feeling very, like the last people in the Indian society. Well, I will try to go quickly now. I won't say that having said that, I would like to say that Sanskrit already did a lot of things for the Western countries, and not only the West, but also for the Muslim world. The first Sanskrit revolution took place during the Middle Ages. During the Middle Ages, the Arabs translated the Sanskrit text, and this Sanskrit text, through Spain, through the School of Translators of Toledo, were put for the first time into Latin. We know that a person called Al-Khwarizmi translated one book called, I think, Hisab al-Hind, as you know, the method of counting of the Hindus. And that was translated into Latin by Spanish translators from the School of Translators of Toledo in the 11th century. And the first zero, the decimal system entered Europe through Spain. For 50 years, the Indian numbers, the decimal numbers, were Toledan numbers. After they changed to Arabic numbers, now we know that they are Indian numbers. And like this, a whole wealth of Indian wisdom came to Europe during the Middle Ages through the medium of the translators in Spain, in Muslim Spain, and into Latin, and that into Europe. And that was the image that Voltaire had of India, that is one of the images of India, the India of knowledge. I cannot refrain, if you give me 2 minutes more, to read one Arab author in the 11th century from Spain, is Ibn Said al-Andalusi, in his book, The Category of Nations, what he had to say the Muslims in the 11th century about India. He says, among the nations of the world, over the passage of centuries and the passage of time, India was known as a veritable mine of wisdom and as a source of justice and good governance. The Indians have been regarded as individuals who demonstrated an excellent understanding of high ideas, of universal principles, of rare talents and inventions. They have studied arithmetic and astronomy. They have also acquired a wealth of knowledge on the movements of stars, the secrets of the celestial sphere, and on the various subtleties of the science of mathematics. Moreover, among all the people, they are the most knowledgeable in the science of medicine and have a thorough knowledge of the properties of medicinal plants, the nature of compound elements, and the peculiarities of the existing things. So this shows, how Islam was regarding India at that time. The second revolution that Sanskrit gave to the Western world was in the 19th century. It's been already referred here by Makaran, and I won't repeat it, but perhaps, you don't, it was MacDonald who said that the discovery of Sanskrit for Europe was like a second Renaissance. And I can give many examples of it, but I give just one. The science of phonetics, which is so important, even for speech recognition, was, Europe knew nothing about that, nothing at all. They don't know the difference between a phoneme, which is sonant, and non-sonant. Many terminology from Western linguistics, like labials, occlusive, dentals, palatals, a labial is a letter pronounced with the lips, like pa, ba, ma, I use the lips. So all this terminology, that is a scientific terminology of linguistics, it's as far as 3,000 years old because we found in the Prati Shakyas. And the Western grammarians knew nothing about that because we Westerners, and this is well documented, were very bad in grammar. We were good in mathematics, but not good in grammar. And, well, to cut it short, and I cannot go at length here, modern linguistics, and Chomsky has recognized that, was born out of Sanskritists. And what they did is to translate many Indian concepts from Paninian grammar into Western terminology. This is not acknowledged today again. And we should remind people about, in the history of science, there's another thing that we have to do, how much even modern science owes to the legacy of Indian science. Well, finally, just to go on finishing, I would like to say that I think, and I wish, and perhaps it could be, I don't know, that we could, if we put a lot of effort, that should have a third Sanskrit revolution into the 21st century. Again, I cannot go into the details of what Sanskrit has to offer in the 21st century. One thing that I advise, we should be aware of not falling into silly things. One silly thing is that it says that language is the most suitable, Sanskrit is the most suitable language for computers. That's not true. That's not the most suitable language for computers is machine language, because they are machines. That's another thing. Sanskrit logic has conceptual categories that can help us to build software, using those concepts and translating them into the language or into programming languages. But that's a different thing. So we should be very careful. But just to go very quickly, Sanskrit can contribute in the 21st century into logic. Formal logic was invented by Indians in the 30th century with Navya Nyaya, Gangesha. Sanskrit can help in aesthetics. The theory of rasa, is the subjective theory of rasa, explains why we are so happy when consuming fiction, when watching movies or seeing the theater, in a way that no Western theory of aesthetics has done. But again, hermeneutics, and here I refer to mimamsa, the power of interpretation of mimamsa. Again, linguistics, of course, that's political science will benefit from a good reading of Arthashastra and all the Niti Shastras that are there, and we should tell the world that democracy was not invented in Greece, that India also had democracy in the time of Buddha, and that's a myth that we Westerners like very much to build upon. What to say about mind and cognitive sciences, the study of consciousness? I mean, again, we can contribute a lot. Of course, Sanskrit is the language of yoga. Sanskrit is the language of Ayurveda. But the difficult thing to do, and that's another thing that we should get together and plan it properly, is how to extract this wisdom from the Sanskrit commentaries and make it available to people who do not know Sanskrit. It's not an easy thing, because people who has a thorough knowledge of the commentaries, they are not interested in modern Western discourse or academic discourse. And people who are very well trained in Western academics, they know not Sanskrit enough to go deep into these things. But I think a combined effort should be done to make this happen and make it a reality. And मैं 2-3 शब्द तो हिंदी में ज़रूर कहना चाहता हूँ आप लोगों के लिए. मुझे पता नहीं लोग मुझे हिंदू कह लेंगे या नहीं, लेकिन मैं अपने आप को हिंदू मानता हूँ. मैं तो पूजा पाठ करता हूँ, वेदा पाठ भी करता हूँ, अध्ययन करता हूँ, और सबसे ज़रूरी जो है मैं मेरे गुरुजी का चरण स्पर्श भी करता हूँ. नमस्कार.